I'd now like to introduce Kirby Roots-Murdy, the project coordinator with BOEM, for a presentation on the New Jersey leasing process history for OCSA 0549. Kirby?
Thanks, ma'am. Good evening. As mentioned, my name is Kirby Roots-Murdy. I'm the project coordinator within the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, commonly referred to as BOEM. I work within the Bureau's Office of Renewable Energy Programs, and I'll be providing a brief overview of the New Jersey leasing history for OCSA, which refers to the Outer Continental Shelf Atlantic Region Lease Area 0549. Next slide, please. First, a brief background on the BOEM Office of Renewable Energy Programs. In 2009, the Department of Interior announced the final regulations for the Outer Continental Shelf Renewable Energy Program, which was authorized by the Energy Policy Act of 2005. These regulations provide a framework for issuing leases, easements, and rights-of-way for OCS activities that support production and transmission of energy from sources other than oil and natural gas. The mission of the Office of Renewable Energy Programs is to facilitate the responsible development of renewable energy resources on the Outer Continental Shelf through conscientious planning, stakeholder engagement, comprehensive environmental analysis, and sound technical review. Next slide. So, how do we get there? The BOEM renewable energy process from initial concept to installation of wind turbine generators is broken into four main stages. First, planning and analysis. Second, leasing. Third, site assessment. And fourth, construction and operation. It's important to understand that the foundation of this process through each stage is to use the best available science as well as input from the public, resource users, as well as state, federal, and tribal nations to understand equities and concerns and to make sure we're doing so in a manner that is stewarding the resource in the best possible way. Next in my presentation, I'll focus on the planning and analysis and leasing stages that BOEM undertakes broadly, and then move into how that process played out for lease OCS 0549. So moving on to the next slide. So on this slide, one more slide over. Thank you. Is a zoomed in version of the planning, analysis, and leasing stage to provide important milestones from initial interest to lease auction. The goal of this stage can best be understood as a winnowing process to identify an area for sale. To begin, an initial area is identified on the Outer Continental Shelf that may be suitable for potential offshore wind development. We then move into a request for interest. This is a formalized step in the early stages of BOEM's process to determine if there is competitive interest in offshore wind leasing, as well as to shed more light on the suitability of an area for wind energy development. This request for interest is done by publishing a notice in the Federal Register to collect information to determine if there is a competitive interest. That is, if there's more than one entity or company in the development community interested in developing offshore wind in this area. To aid in this process, task forces are generally established, which consist of representatives from federally recognized tribes, federal agencies, as well as state and local governments. Based on input received during the public comment period at this step, a call area smaller than the identified request for interest area is outlined and determined. And in the next step of the process, a call for information and nominations occurs. So next in this formal step in the process, there are two components. BOEM asks for information on special consideration and analysis of the call area, as well as if there are certain conditions that are important to understand in the space. The call area and public comment period at this step in the process gives the public a clear picture of where the potential lease area will be. The second component is the call for nominations, which is to ask for the development community to tell us what they think of the area that we are outlining. Specifically, are there places within the call area that are more appealing to develop, and if so, why? It's important to understand that BOEM may forego the previously mentioned step, a request for interest, and move into issuing the call for information, which can serve as determining if there's competitive interest for offshore wind leasing. Next, we move into the area identification. So after having put out a call for information and held a public comment period, reviewed those comments and input, BOEM will determine a wind energy area, or WEA, which is a portion of the Outer Continental Shelf that BOEM has identified for analysis under the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, which will take the form of an environmental assessment. This is done through publishing a notice of intent in the Federal Register to prepare an environmental assessment to support BOEM's leasing and site assessment plan decision-making. Traditionally, we use this process to determine a deconflicting area and its boundaries that will be offered for sale, but BOEM can further divide that space to have lease areas that are smaller and within the wind energy area. So it's important to note here that getting a lease area or areas for sale is a narrowing down of the potential space that wind energy development can occur. And moving into the leasing document development, based on our work conducted to complete the environmental assessment in consultation with other federal partner agencies, this step in the process further finalizes the lease area. Not only the size and shape of the lease area, but the number of areas, as well as aids in developing leasing documents for a proposed sale notice, which outline the auction process for the lease area, as well as financial terms and requirements for the potential lessees. The proposed sale notice is published in the Federal Register and is exactly what it states: a notice to the public of the proposed sale. Following a 60-day comment period and review of public comments, a final sale notice is published, which is then followed by the auction of the lease area or areas. So to summarize, from initial interest to lease, auction, and sale, BOEM engages federal agencies, federally recognized tribes, state and local governments through the state's Renewable Energy Task Force, the offshore wind development community, as well as resource users and the public. So moving from this general process to how it specifically was used for OCSA 0549, I'll outline some key considerations in the development of the lease area to where we are today with the construction and operations plan. Next slide. So for OCSA 0549, the process began in 2009. The BOEM New Jersey Renewable Energy Task Force was formed and comprised of local, state government, and elected officials, federal agencies, and federally recognized tribes. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection studied the marine space off the New Jersey coast, outlined in green on the map on the right. I will talk about this study in later slides in greater detail. From 2009 through 2014, the New Jersey Renewable Energy Task Force met 6 times, providing input from the initial request of interest through the call for information and nominations. BOEM used engagement with the task force, information from the New Jersey Ecosystem Baseline Study, as well as some resource users in the public to delineate and refine the call area off the New Jersey coast. The pyramid on the left side of the slide outlines a good visual representation of how the volume of information on the eventual lease area was gathered over time. Starting at the top of the pyramid with dialogue and input from task force meetings, information from those meetings were further expanded upon by understanding the marine environment, processes, habitat, and ecology through the New Jersey Ecosystem Baseline Study, with both of those informational and knowledge inputs further deepened by stakeholder and resource user and public input, with finally even greater understanding of the area developed based on new data that was not available at the beginning of the process, but collected over the years. So based on this deliberative process, in the next few slides, I'll provide some examples of how the call area was further winnowed down based on information provided. Next slide. In evaluating the area off of the New Jersey coast for offshore wind development, addressing navigational concerns was a key issue that came up. The New Jersey coastline is sandwiched between 2 major ports, the Port of New York and New Jersey to the north, and the Delaware River Port Complex to the south. Vessel traffic from these 2 locations was an important consideration. BOEM relied on the U.S. Coast Guard to help understand and evaluate potential issues and challenges within the call area. In the map on the left side of the slide, you can see traffic separation scheme lanes at the top right corner of the image, going south from New York, as well as in the bottom left corner coming out of Delaware Bay, with an area of high concern in between the schemes for both directions. A transit route that follows the New Jersey coastline with a 1 nautical mile buffer, as well as a tug and barge transit route. So in evaluating this feedback, BOEM was able to validate this information with data to confirm the locations, the route, as well as the volume of vessel traffic. In total, the U.S. Coast Guard and marine resource users helped us better understand where potential conflicts or navigational challenges could occur, and this information was taken into account for further refining the call area to wind energy area and subsequent lease area. In the next slide, I'll provide a similar example of information provided by the Department of Defense. So next slide. The Department of Defense was another key federal partner that provided feedback on potential areas of conflict with their operations. In the map on the left side of the slide, DoD provided a helpful color coding of where specifically within the call area they recommended exclusion of wind energy development based on DoD training operations and activities. These areas are shaded in red. For areas shaded in yellow, they could move forward with some type of mitigation or site-specific stipulation for potential wind energy development. The areas shaded green indicate no issue with DoD activities. The map on the right side of the slide shows how this feedback specifically recommended exclusion areas were incorporated into the wind energy area. In the next slide, I'll outline how the New Jersey Ecosystem Baseline Study fed into the New Jersey Task Force process. So moving into the next slide. All right, so the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection undertook an extensive 2-year effort to study the estuarine and marine environments along the New Jersey coast. The study was one of the largest of its kind and was conducted to help fill in data gaps, looking at seabirds, sea turtles, marine mammals, as well as marine resources targeted and used for commercial and recreational purposes. This study provided information on feasible water depth outlined in the second map with the red outline for potential wind energy projects going out to approximately 23 miles offshore. BOEM participated in the study and was able to integrate data from the study into the Outer Continental Shelf leasing blocks. So the green squares within the call area in the third image. With this information incorporating both physical and biological data, an environmental sensitivity index was created to help identify areas that could have multiple use conflicts and impacts to ecological processes. If you click next, we should have a little animation. So based on the environmental sensitivity index, many areas that were deemed most sensitive and considered best to avoid for wind energy development were incorporated into the wind energy area and were excluded from the eventual lease area. Moving into our next slide. So as noted, BOEM started working with the New Jersey Renewable Energy Task Force in 2009. 2 years later, BOEM published the call for information and nominations in April of 2011. The feedback from the call for information and nominations, a reminder, which seeks to provide information on the area as well as nominations of interest that helps BOEM understand if there's a competitive interest from the development community on specific areas within the wind energy area. The map on the left side of the screen shows density plots of where there was the most interest. So less interest is indicated in cooler colors, with greater interest indicated in warmer colors, yellow to red. In total, 11 separate companies provided nominations of interest, which are displayed on the bottom of the slide. The two primary concerns identified from the call for information nominations were impacts to commercial fisheries, specifically for the commercial surf clam fishery, as well as previously highlighted vessel traffic concerns. In the next slide, I'm going to highlight the timeline for the proposed sale notice. Moving on to our next slide. On this slide, the following bullets outline the timeline from how the wind energy area moved through the sale notice stages to become lease area OCSA 0499, and subsequently for this project, the current lease of OCSA 0549. So in June 2014, BOEM published the proposed sale notice. As part of this process, 29 aliquots were removed from the wind energy area to the lease area due to vessel traffic concerns. In September of 2015, BOEM published the final sale notice. No more aliquot or areas were removed, but areas with potential restrictions due to vessel traffic or the presence of active subsea cables were identified. In November 2015, the auction was held with companies, the number of rounds, and the bid amounts listed in the table on the right side of the slide. There were 3 participants in the auction. It went 7 rounds with the winning bid for OCSA 0499 off the coast of New Jersey going for just over $1 million. The winner of the auction was US Wind. In 2018, US Wind assigned the lease to EDF Renewables, and subsequently in April 2019, EDF Renewables assigned the lease to Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind LLC, the current lessee today. In April 2022, BOEM approved the request from Atlantic Shores for a lease segregation on lease OCSA 0499, subsequently creating two separate and distinct lease areas. The northern portion of OCSA 0499 was retained by Atlantic Shore's Offshore Wind and given a new lease area, which is 0549, the one we are presenting on tonight. Moving on to our next slide, I'll give some highlights on the construction operations plan. So in April of 2022, the Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind LLC provided a construction and operations plan, or what we refer to as a COP, for lease area OCS 0549. From that point until earlier this year in 2024, BOEM has worked with Atlantic Shores to address comments and requests for additional information in order to find the COP complete and sufficient. On March 1st, 2024, BOEM received the most recent construction and operations plan. This version of the COP is available on BOEM's website at the link below. In the next presentation, my colleague Kimberly Sullivan will provide information on the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, process that BOEM will undertake for this process, or for this project and moving forward. So move on to my last slide. So in closing, I provided a brief overview of the leasing process history for lease area OCS 0549. My contact information, including email and phone number, can be found on this slide. And for more information on this project and subsequent updates, please visit the link at the bottom of the slide. Thank you all for listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Kirby.